Don't forget, we still have the CTF behind the Qualys booth, and then also upstairs we have Lockpick Village. Anyone who hasn't thrown their business card into the drawing at the entrance table yet for the GoPro and for the Nest, make sure to throw something in there by the end of the day. I'm not sure if the drawing is tonight or if it's going to be tomorrow. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jenn Black, and she's going to talk about threat intelligence. Thank you, Jenn.
Oh, y'all haven't heard me speak yet, so this is actually the work that Rafael Los, I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with him. He spent about 6 months doing nothing but researching how to operationalize a threat intelligence program. And so these are mostly his slides, and he has sent me in his place today. And we will kind of go through, we will go through in much detail what he has found. The first thing that he found really was that these words do not do not mean what you think they mean. Threat intelligence seems to be a quite hotly debated topic, and then there's a lot of different definitions for what exactly it is. So we're going to try to nail a little bit of that down. Our group, the Solutions Research and Development Group of Optiv, our primary mission is to demystify solutions to business problems. I promise these introduction slides are pretty short. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with them. We employ what they call a trident methodology. We run focus groups with enterprise adopters at the security leader level. We consult SMEs, not SMEs, internal to our company and within the security community at large. And then we extensively interview solution providers, otherwise known as vendor speed dating. If you haven't experienced that, it's really fun. Come see me at Black Hat. I'll put you to work. This slide just mostly summarizes kind of what I already covered. So if we move on to our actual topic, threat intelligence, hooray! I just wanted to start with giving a little bit of background. I kind of already said my boss spent 6 months researching, living, breathing, eating, nothing but threat intelligence, and he ran some focus groups in several different cities. Along the way, he kept hearing the same things from leaders. Static security programs, they're just not working. We're still doing firewalls. We've got some new features to those firewalls, but the old tactics never really worked that well, and they're working even less. So the result to that wonderful problem is a highly fractured marketplace. We've got lots and lots of boxes out there that say now fortified with threat intelligence, and we have about 122,264 different meanings of the word. And just about every vendor will help you go broke trying to fix what they think is the problem. But there is a real opportunity here, and the opportunity exists in complementing existing security, enterprise security programs with elements of threat intelligence, in a pragmatic and measurable way. Measurable is very key to leadership. That's very important to them. Can we prove that we're actually getting better? So where do we start? A definition. This definition came from some tradecraft kind of intelligence communities, as well as what some of the other analyst groups had to say. And it is basically an ecosystem of contextually relevant and evidence-based knowledge integrated into platforms and tools to quickly and accurately address dangers to individuals, organizations, or assets in a standardized and consumable format. The important thing here is that it's not a data feed. It's not a box. It's not one thing. It is all of these things in the right measures. More or less, it's the right amount of medicine for what ails you, and not just, hey, here's a Tylenol. So we asked security information leaders and the community, what were their business drivers? So when they went, hey, this threat intelligence stuff, I need some of that. What really prompted, what were their key drivers that prompted that decision? And we found that there were 3 things that they listed out almost universally, and then there was one thing that they hinted at, but they never actually said. And the first one is to improve the efficiency of current resources. Do the stuff that they do today, but better. Increase the speed and efficiency in detection. We're past the point where prevention is the only thing that matters, and companies are acknowledging that they will probably get malware or there will be an intrusion. So how do we keep that from being cataclysmic to the organization? Increase efficiency of response. Incident responders are expensive and hard to find. So before we push the infamous Reagan big red button, the cost on incident response, you have to understand that the cost of incident response is high in terms of dollars and productivity to the organization. What no one said, but most of these security leaders in the room hinted about, was that there's a side effect of all of this, that there's an expectation that will reduce the overall attack exposure and opportunity, which means that if you're doing something like you're in the process of moving business operations into a foreign country like Russia or China, you should be able to understand, get some situational awareness of the environment ahead of time and understand what types of things you're likely to encounter. These are the drivers from the business side, what drives these programs. Did anybody have questions thus far? Sure.
Item number one there.
Mm-hmm.
Resources, do you know some people or just
We mean all three: people, processes, and technology. Okay. So then we talked about the foundations for the program. What these security leaders that were building threat intelligence programs today, what they felt like were essential pieces that they needed to either have in place or be able to do well before they could efficiently build or even think about building a threat intelligence program. One of the key ones was vulnerability management. Being able to find your vulnerabilities, manage your exposure, manage and address your risk. That was something that they felt was very important to be able to do. ITIL fundamentals, the change configuration and asset management. None of the organizations that we spoke to felt like they did this well, but they did think that you needed to have a handle on what they are and understand them in order to be able to build a threat intelligence program. Data classification and governance we felt was interesting because several DLP companies now offer this. They do data discovery and analysis. And there are a number of tools out there that will help you do this, but it was still considered a foundational element for a successful threat intel program. Operational goals: prevent, detect, respond, and recover. Prevent as much as you can the things you already know about. And how do you do that? With timely and accurate shared threat data. These are your threat feeds. Your IP reputation, DNS records, MD5 hashes, that kind of a thing. Detect the rest. Detect it as fast as you can. How do you find the bad stuff? What does the bad stuff look like on your network? Respond as effectively as possible because resources are limited. And we're talking about purposeful actions here, not just re-image every machine that gets infected. And recover. This is getting an organization back to a fully operational state, closing feedback loops, and mitigating vulnerabilities across your assets. And then there was the solution marketplace. Now, better with threat intelligence. Like I said, we spent a lot of time interviewing vendors in this space, and we found that the marketplace essentially broke up into three key areas. There's the intelligence sources, which there's data sources and feeds of all shapes and sizes and varieties, all the way from JSON and sticks and taxi to really cool looking dashboards. If it's got a dashboard, it must be cool. Intelligence sources are, of course, your data feeds of various kinds. Mitigating technologies is where we kind of put everything else. As long as it served to prevent, detect, respond, or recover, we considered the box with malware, threat intel logo stamped on the side in this category. And then the fusion and analytics platforms were really interesting because we really don't hear about them near enough. Instead, we get a lot of, hey, great, I need some of this threat intelligence stuff, What sim would you recommend, and what data feed should I put in it? And we really try to steer people away from this type of thinking for various reasons, but the primary one being that we think sims are largely misunderstood. And for them to do a really good job of correlation, the more data you pump into them, the smaller that sliding window of detection gets. And that's where fusion and analytics platforms come in, because like Threat Connect, Threat Quotient, those are a couple of the ones that we talked to that we thought were really good. Their job is to ingest large volumes of data, normalize it, do data analysis, and then if they find something interesting, make the call into the SIM and see if they can determine if there's something internally that matches the pattern. And that keeps the window, that sliding window of detection on the SIM a lot larger than what it would be if you were pumping all that data into just to the SIM. Okay, so this slide, I think this one largely speaks for itself. The important things to note is data volume is across the bottom on the horizontal, and the strategic value is on the vertical. The data, there is no correlation that we found between the high volume and low strategic versus the high strategic and low volume, that one or the other was more valuable. It was really more about which one is more valuable when. So then we have a kind of another view of this. When we talk about, static indicators have a fairly short half-life, from 5 minutes to maybe an hour. They're important, but it's a high data volume and a low strategic value, which means that you have to automate the crap out of this stuff or you'll drown. Signatures and composite indicators are a little bit more strategic, but these are still primarily for automated systems. Tactical reporting. Now these are your specialized feeds like an iSight or an iDefense or CrowdStrike. Reports that clients can pull based on their vertical market, geographic location, things like that. You're a financial company and you're moving into China or Russia. What types of threats might you be facing? Strategic reporting is the long-range strategy stuff. I'm in the medical industry and I want to know what's going on in the world, so that as a business leader, I'm aware that the Chinese will actively attempt to borrow my diabetic research to solve problems in their own population's health. Does anybody have any questions on this so far? Okay. We will just keep cooking through. The fusion and analytics platforms, the components of that, they're primarily taking in the raw intelligence. And then there's the analytics platforms. When they're with them, there's some data enrichment that can happen to improve that raw intelligence data that they're taking in. You're doing this so that you have an opportunity to triage and analyze the data kind of in an automated fashion to ultimately drive response procedures. Some of these can issue a firewall block or create and track work streams. They'll do ticketing and send those to your forensics teams. They're pretty powerful and interesting platforms. And then there's the mitigating technologies: prevent, detect, respond, and recover. Prevention is where a lot of your network stuff lives. There's a split between prevention and detection right now. If the product detects patterns but not anomalies, we considered it prevention. Detection, those were the solutions that they don't even claim they're going to stop anything. But they will do things like query a large volume of workstations to find out which one of these is not like the others and which one does not belong. Response are the forensic platforms and tools which help investigate potential incidents and gather evidence. Some of the endpoint platforms we found can do response on the endpoint, but generally these tools work in conjunction with human interaction. There may be some automation in the area of remediation efforts. So the important thing that we really are proud of with our research is this maturity model. And these were the 5 goals of developing a maturity model: to help organizations focus on their security goals, define an achievable roadmap, focus on maturing capabilities delivered through resources, and defining a complete operational and actionable framework. The blueprint that we produced as a result of this this research, it's about 50 pages, and that has graphics in it. I mean, it was designed to be very readable and usable. And then we wanted to provide a framework for measurable results, because if you can't measure it, you may as well not do it. Or as Homer says, the moral is, don't try. Slide 20. You didn't go. Okay. So here is the maturity model. We are keeping the titles of these maturity models as we investigate additional security programs. We're running focus groups right now on cloud security, actually. But the definitions will change. We're going to go through these in a little bit more detail as we kind of go through, but an example is reactive is largely product-centric in the realm of threat intelligence, but it wouldn't be necessarily in cloud security. So we're just changing the definitions based on what we found in our research. So like I said, reactive is product-centered, and it's when your organization chooses to move out of awareness. It's because you want to do something, but you can't do everything a more mature organization can. You don't have the dozens of resources. You don't have the contracts already in place. So the relatively easy thing for you to do is to leverage the existing technology and the people that you have. So the maturity model goes from left to right. And the bookends of it, the aware to strategic, is talking about the maturity and business alignment. Strategic is actually leveraging threat intelligence to make more informed business decisions. If you think that's about as likely as the pink unicorn in the wild, we did actually spend a good amount of time with one of our clients who their threat intel team reported directly to the board of directors, and the board of directors was asking them questions about expanding into new markets and new geographic regions. Yes, sir. That's a good question. I did not spend the time with them, so I would be glad to ask my boss and get back to you. I mean, my understanding from what he told me about it was that they were primarily responsible for things like hunting, and they were the true, just security intelligence team. Right. Exactly. But if you would like me to, I'd be happy to follow back up with you. Anybody else? Okay. So then the three in the middle, this is maturity and technical capabilities primarily. So as we already kind of covered, reactive is focusing on getting the tech to do your bidding. You want to knock out the threats you can early and fast. From the adaptive perspective, though, you want to use vetted threat intelligence, which is when you start considering data quality, because not all threat feeds were created equal. And there's a real focus at this stage on improving security operations through repeatability, scalability, and efficiency. Early on, you look for patterns, but by purposeful, your tech is looking for patterns, and you're doing things like hunting, network profiling, user profiling, and even behavioral analysis. Any questions about this? Okay. So we go on to the types of distinguishing these threat types, because we're also going to overlay this on the maturity model in just a second. So targeting has to do with whether somebody was specifically targeting you and your organization, or whether you were a target of opportunity. So did you click on some malware? Did you get crypto locker because you have money, or because you're an oil exec? And then persistence has to do more with intent. The focus is on how they got in without being detected, and how did they move around. we estimate that generic threats are probably about 80% of the threats out there. These are your known knowns, and they really should never lead to an incident. Should is a strong word there. And target is about 18 to 19% of the threats out there. These are, this is like somebody took ZeusBot and adapted it to your particular organization. It's still pattern related, but it's not directed. And then persistent is someone walked through your filtering, did their recon on your system, found out you had a FireEye box and what else you had on your network. They took what they needed and they got out. Your goal here is to not prevent, because good luck, but to detect and respond. And so here we lay those across the maturity model. And as you probably would expect, the generic should be taken care of largely by tools. In adaptive, you start being able to do some of the reverse engineering. And then persistent and purposeful, you can start doing hunt capability. You start developing your hunt capabilities, and you can do some detection of anomalies. Any questions? No? All right. So then the model components, as we've been going through our focus group sessions, we're asking these security leaders to help us identify what are the business drivers, what are the prerequisites, the operational components, which are what do I buy, who do I hire, what processes do I need to put in place, and then achievements and capabilities of each stage. What do you need to actually be able to do, and then how do you measure that against your security goals? What is important to your organization? How can we develop KPIs that will measure progress? These are definitions for drivers and prerequisites. I think it's worth noting that one of the things that we feel differentiates our research is that we overlay these things across our maturity model. And it's also important, I think, to note that maturity isn't necessarily linear, but we feel like it is largely additive. So moving on to the process model. So as I mentioned, my boss spent a lot of time with a world-class threat intelligence organization that helped us define this process model. It is distinctly related to the maturity model, but it is different. So these are processes as opposed to phases that you would work through. And we'll just go ahead and take a look at it because there's 11 different processes, and you, as a 5, if you're on a if you're a level 5, you're going to do some of all of these things to varying degrees, probably most of them well. But if you're at like a level 2 or a 3, you may only do half of them in different phases. So the reason why this little this diagram is particularly important is we give a self-assessment where you can go online and take a quiz and basically to help determine where your organization is on the overall maturity model. So from that perspective, it also gives you an opportunity to request a copy of our blueprint. So the blueprint is available for free. You just have to take the self-assessment. And that's pretty much the end of what I had to present. This kind of just goes through the definitions of what the different phases are. If you don't do at least some acquisition or development, you probably don't have a distinguishable threat intelligence program. So that was one little. I can't really take any of the rest of the questions, but. And then these are the available resources. You can get our primer right off of our internet, and you can take our maturity assessment from the website and request more information. And I did that in 32 minutes. I was like, it's 35 slides. Why do I have to do that for an hour? He's like, oh, it's gonna be hard to present all of that in an hour. 32 minutes. Go. Yes, sir.
So, some of the things you mentioned as we go through this, and you're working with companies as part of
sites are taking the blueprint very well. This is a service that's being sold. I saw your big office that said so. That's sold.
Yes, so we'll do it both ways. We will, we'll talk with you, give you the copy of the blueprint, and you can say thank you very much, Mr. and Mrs. Optiv. We're going to go build this ourselves. We appreciate the insight, or we will help you. We've spent, like I said, we spent a lot of time vendor speed dating, and we've got a list of vendors that fit the different operational elements. That there's several of them, so we don't have to be like only use this one. We can use the best one for your organization. We start off with a workshop where we primarily identify your goals in the program, and it's a relatively inexpensive engagement.
The other question I've got is, it's like how the focus on the consumption model. It seems like
Or the transistor radio. It's kind of.
I see the sclerosis
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
process. It seemed like there was, once you consumed it, you got to analyze and apply it to whatever you can count.
Mm-hmm.
There's also kind of feedback.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's feedback as a core process on there. Sorry.
This is more
Yeah, what was really interesting is when you go through these focus groups and you've got these titles for the maturity thing, they spend a lot of time actually kind of around this axle, and we go no, like you have all of these things in this phase, and then you have all of those things in this phase, and they go, but if I react, I do, and no. It's not. I lift a we had the example in one of them. It was I lift a rock, I see a bug, and I react and I smash it, and then. No, that's not what reactive is. So, awareness was maybe you lifted the rock and you saw the bug, and then you understand that there's more rocks and there's more bugs, more potential for more bugs. And then if you want to do something about it, then you move into the reactive phase, and that looks like, this or that or the other. So the process thing, I think we probably should start introducing that a little bit earlier, because there's processes and, these and just elements of people, process, and technology in each phase, and it builds on it, and as you go from phase to phase. Yes, sir.
So that's a good point. Did you go and came in about mistake?
Sure.
Did you go through some of the actual day-to-day activities that go into this? I understand that tell stuff that's a machine thing.
Mm-hmm.
What do people do on a day-to-day basis? Do they actually look at it? Do they write reports? Do they make changes to the network configurations?
Right. So what we did is we brought in, there was probably 67, 68 people across 4 different cities, I believe, that at the security leader level that talked to us about the, no holds barred, how it works from an operational level and the challenges that they were seeing.
I heard you say security leaders and then I heard you say operation.
Oh, I apologize. It was actually kind of, yeah, that's a very fair point. You wouldn't believe the number of times we heard that there was a prerequisite of you have to know who your network and your operational guys are. And that it's kind of it's an interesting point and a bad commentary on our industry at the same time. Yes, sir.
You mentioned before you got into this that many companies recognized that they weren't very mature in things like idle, configuration management, et cetera, How do you get past to this if you can't even get past that?
Right.
And so is it really a thing where we're going to go spend $10 million to get mature in all this and then come to this? How easy is that to do, or how achievable is that to do?
Oh, easy is going to be relative, right? But and I can't imagine it being very easy. I came from an organization where I don't think they could spell ITIL. We won't name them, but they were really big on their ITIL certifications, and they can tell you what assets they had. Trying to navigate Heartbleed and some of the other ones was weeks and weeks of nightmare. Those are fundamental to just absolutely fundamental to the ITIL processes. So I really think that the legitimate answer to your question is that you probably cannot get to a level 5 until you clean house, right? You can probably implement some additional technologies. You could probably try to drive some ad hoc changes, which is largely what's in reactive, is you're ad hoc doing this or that, and you're trying to make the resources that you already have a little bit more efficient, or maybe a lot more efficient. But yeah, I don't think you can get to the later stages without conquering those. Yeah, absolutely.
So we had a company come in who basically reviewed some things and said, you're too focused on compliance. You're not holistic enough. But in my opinion, you get the compliance down, that's less to do in the threat intelligence area and less risk on you. But somehow, groups that I've been dealing with lately don't seem to think so.
Interesting.
What does that do for this?
That is a good question. I don't really think I have a good answer for that. I worked my previous job. I worked for CISO, and she was absolutely going to live and die on a cross of PCI for all. We were a service provider, and we were going. PCI should be the base level of all security, all offerings across the board. They ended up walking her out the door. Yeah, so I think the problem is that there seems to be like a dichotomy where you either focus on compliance or you focus on some of these other things and these other parts of security programs. And I think if you focus too much on the compliance, then you lose sight of the whole picture. But at the same time, I mean, those compliances were designed to be kind of a baseline. If you do it right, if you're not just trying to check a box, if you're doing it right, it should be a foundation. Is how I see it. But yes, sir. It's funny because we started off the first two focus groups on cloud security with, so is 0 blissfully ignorant? Where is blissfully ignorant on this scale? And we're like, well, I mean, come on, guys. but yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised to hear that somebody isn't even on the scale. There's a lot of companies out there that kind of feel that way. That said, I would have to get back to you, and I will. I will get back to anybody that has a question that I couldn't answer. Give me your information before you leave, and I will get back to you. My boss would have more of the statistics on size, and it may actually be at the back of our blueprint, or I can just look it up. There were a number of contributors that that agreed to have their names on it since they participated. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So in a company that does not have anything like this going on, do you have any real-world examples besides the house burning down where they decided to implement a program like this? The business leaders decided to push it through?
Well, I can tell you about the program that I ran. We had absolutely no business running a threat intelligence program. We were a managed security services provider, to not be named. And they came to me. I was a bid manager. Let's just get that one out there right now. I managed sales types engagements. And they came to me and they said, we want threat intelligence in 5 months. Go. Okay, so how do we define that? Well, we need, give me some business requirements. And they go, okay, we need to be able to answer RFPs. I can always answer an RFP, buddy. Partially comply, even though we don't do 90% of what you just said. 10% is what the definition of the word is. So, I mean, like, really, can we get something a little bit better than that? And we did it, what we set out to do. This is going to give it away, but we integrated ArcSight with iDefense and Autonomy to ingest social media data. take that in and then use autonomy as kind of a fusion platform, although it's a poorly not a good choice of fusion platforms. And then we fed it into a sim in order to theoretically be able to pull internal patterns. We stood that up. It worked. They couldn't figure out how to sell it. They decided to give it away for free. Then they decided to decommission all my gear and move it to the US. So, yeah, I could tell you all about programs that fail miserably because they were poorly conceived. Yes, I mean...
I think it was what were some drivers that convinced executives that it was necessary.
Right. Well, at the time, it was survival for a managed security services provider. It was, we've got, and I mean, to be fair, the fact that we were able to show WYSI widgets on our dashboard got us into the Forrester, leading quadrant. I mean, that was the result of that. But that was a driver, survival, competitiveness for a managed security services provider. If you would like, again, I promise you, I will follow up. If you want me to go back and ask my boss for some additional details, I would be glad to get back to you. Anybody else? All right. Well, next time I told my boss I'm going to bring in like a little prop that's like a little black box, and it has, now with threat intelligence and, like some cereal box things. I think that would be fun. All right. So I think we're done. Okay. Hooray!